Yo yo yo, hey guys, it's me, Fusion Whatifs, and today I'm back with a new video, this being, what if Deku was Max Steel? Now, yes, I know, what happened to part 2 of what if Naruto was Yorichi's reincarnation, part 2 what if Deku was Shisui's reincarnation, hell, even like part 3 to what if, Deku was Heliotrope, which I'm gonna say they're all gonna be coming soon, but I have 2 videos already planned that I wanted to make, and I felt kinda like I really wanted to make them, so yeah. I will link all those like 3 videos, the part 1s to those in the top right, so please go check those out. And yeah, please like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the video, trying to hit 3K eventually. And without further ado, play my intro. Alright, with that all said and done, let's get straight into it. We begin with a 15-year-old Izuku, and he still looked the same as usual, black hair, face with the green highlights, freckles, and his vibrant green eyes, right? Now, as we tune into this Izuku, we'd look up to Bakugo, who would be saying, "Hey, nerd, you know what? Maybe if you jumped off a building, you could hope for a quirk in your next life." Hearing this, Izuku would feel a spark of anger like nothing ever before. This betrayal from somebody he deluded himself into believing was his friend, somebody who believed cared about him, someone who's been with him since he was 4. His eyes would begin to glow a vibrant green as a sort of heat wave-like energy filled with blue particles would radiate off of him. Seeing this, Bakugo would actually be sort of confused. Deku doesn't have a quirk. What is this? He would sort of reach towards Izuku, and Izuku would swipe his hands. Instantly, the energy would surge with Izuku's emotions, knocking Bakugo away and his lackeys, knocking them all out. Scared, Izuku wouldn't even know what to do. He would sort of scamper around the room a little before deciding to run away back home, right? Still radiating this energy, he would actually end up running down the same tunnel that he met Sludge Villain. In this one, Sludge Villain wouldn't even talk to him, he just sort of engulf him. More so feeling this, Izuku would continue to produce more energy, scared that his life was in danger, not sure what to do. He was afraid, until eventually, reaching an emotional climax, an explosion would happen, and Sludge Villain would be splattered everywhere, completely knocked out. But in Izuku's mind, he pretty much just killed a man. Feeling his fear rise once again, he could rush home, not even noticing that he seemed faster. His perception would be boosted and his senses would be heightened. Arriving home, he could only say a few words. "Dad, I need help. I don't know what's happening," as he'd end up collapsing to his knees. Hasashi would rush into the room, and seeing the energy leaking off of Izuku would say, "Izuku, calm down, okay? Trust me, everything's gonna be okay," as he quickly disappears into a room before returning with something in his hand. Izuku would try to blink through his tears in hopes of getting a better look at what Hasashi was holding, before seeing what looks to be a metallic white ball. Confused by this, Izuku would look up towards his dad, who would tell him that, "Just trust me, okay? This is gonna help." Trusting his dad, he would reach forward to try and touch this ball, before eventually the energy would get to it first. Almost as if activating, it would instantly unfurl before scratching. It seemed to be a sort of blue boomerang, but much more high-tech, that had a screen in the middle, and black patterns on it with alongside blue, right? Instantly he would say, "Oh, it's been, 38 years since I've been awake? Guess you finally awakened it, huh?" He would look forward before looking at Izuku before saying, "Hey Max, you look a lot younger than last time." "Wait, you're not Max. Max doesn't have freckles, or even green-tinged hair." Eventually, this is when the robot would end up using its scan feature and seeing that, yeah, you're half Tachyon, but you're something else. And last time I checked, Max's kid was full Tachyon. So that means that, hold on, you're his grandkid? Izuku, not knowing what to say, would sort of just stand there shocked at this sentient talking robot like boomerang, before Hasashi would then say, "Hey Steel, I haven't actually had the chance to meet you yet, but yeah, I am Max's kid, and that is my son. Anyways, he needs help right now. As you can see, he's struggling." Instantly looking back at Izuku, Steel would then begin to sense energy and then say, "Whoa, he has a lot of turbo energy actually. So I guess he's going to be the one I'm going to be linking with this time, huh?" Sad that you didn't unlock it, but still. He would then look towards Izuku before saying, okay, trust me, and this is gonna hurt a little bit, okay? Before then, it would seem that he would go from this loose hanging robot into assuming sort of more rigid boomerang form and shooting directly into Izuku's chest. Immediately, this ball of blue energy would surround them, and he would be left in a suit. A blue suit with black undershirt or black undermesh and blue highlights. Sorry, a white suit, black undersuit, white highlights. And immediately, Izuku's turbo energy would end up being contained. Hasashi would then have to begin to explain to Izuku what would be happening, right? The history of how he's actually an alien called a Takanian, and how they came from the planet Takon, right? The war between the Takanians and the Ultralinks, how Steel betrayed, the Ultralinks to end up joining with his dad, which would be Izuku's grandfather, Max, the mutual destruction, and how he was transported alongside Steel. And the fact that his physical enhancement quirk isn't actually an enhancement quirk, it's just his regular tachyon genes. Izuku would be surprised by all of this, and he wouldn't even know what to say. Eventually, he ended up saying, you said turbo energy, right? What is turbo energy? Immediately, Steel would end up shooting out from Izuku's chest and then saying, well, that's what I'm here for. So, turbo energy, or I guess on this earth, it would be called Tachyon Limited Radiant Bio-Optimized Energy, which is just turbo energy in acronym, and would explain about how it would be able to boost his physical stats above anything we've seen before, affects technology, but it does have the downside that it is extremely difficult to control, and that his grandfather even had a hard time controlling it up until, he had Steel join with him, right? Now, this is where he would have to actually talk about his grandfather, right? Steel would explain that his grandfather Max was one of the best and his first actual host, right? And he would explain how his grandfather also had Tachyon energy and how it helped even out the war with the Ultralinks. But when Tachyon was about to be destroyed, because, the Ultralinks would have been there, and even though Max was strong, he couldn't stop all of them. He would end up sending off Steel and his son, who was not named Hasashi at the time, away. And by doing so, he would also overload his energy, his turbo energy, and blow up the entire planet of Tachyon, with no survivors left. Now, hearing this, Izuku ended up being completely surprised, and Steel actually ended up saying that the interesting part here is that Tachyon energy is kind of hard to inherit, right? It's usually pretty hereditary, so not many Tachyonians have it. Surprisingly enough, it skipped Hasashi, but it seemed that you awakened it. A little bit late because of your human heritage, but that would actually end up boosting your potential, just due to the pure adaptivity that would come with being a human. Izuku would end up nodding his head at this, before them being told that Izuku as of right now was producing way more energy than his grandpa ever could at his age, and with time he might even surpass his grandpa's total output. But hearing all of this, Izuku would only really hear that he has strength, he had power, he could be a hero. He'd end up looking towards Steel and then ask, Steel, with these abilities, could I be a hero? Immediately Steel would say, of course. Actually, I can make you one of the greatest heroes to ever live, even stronger than your grandpa. Hearing this, Steel would then say hearing this, Izuku would then immediately start grinning, excited, and after Steel would say he's gonna get some rest, and that they should figure out a plan too, right? And also that the suit is permanent for right now before shooting back into Izuku's chest, asleep, but not before changing them into somewhat comfy PJs, because they are, techno-organic, so they can't just change into like metal to fiber and all that. With this, it would now just be Hasashi and Izuku. With this, Hasashi would immediately just break down, crying, and he would apologize for not telling Izuku about his heritage, but even more so about not telling Izuku about him potentially inheriting turbo energy. The fear that Izuku could have actually died if they weren't quick enough, right? The fact that he can't lose in the same way that they lost Inko. Izuku would just hug his dad, crying to, the Midoriya tears, before telling him that it's okay and that he'll be the best hero ever. And he'll make mom proud. The next day, we would now have Steel and Izuku waking up, and Steel would then tell him that he was actually looking over Izuku's memories and also the internet, and he figured out a sort of training plan, but mostly for now I'll be focusing on energy control for the first 5 months, and then actual combat the last 5. Or I guess the later 5, right? And this is where they'd actually end up proceeding to, Dagobah Beach. As they get here, Izuku would end up asking, why are they, practicing control? And, Steel would end up saying, well, there's a lot of reasons why, but I feel like the main one should be, what happens if your kid has turbo energy, right? As of right now, you can't control any of it without me. And I'd rather be able to help your future generation than have to worry about you dying as I immediately, unbond, right? Plus, bonding is a pretty long process in and of itself, so if I do bond with your kid, I can't just come back to you immediately. Now we would have the 10-month time skip as they're training. After this, we would now have Izuku strolling onto campus wearing dark green sweats, a white undershirt, and a green hoodie with Steel symbol on the front. Obviously, this would just be, turbo camouflage mode. It just makes, his regular, turbo suit look like regular outfit. And he would have pretty much Max's fit, but just in green, right? Now, speaking of Steel, he would actually be floating right beside Izuku as he would register as part of his quirk. They would have some friendly banter going back and forth, saying that, hey, I can't wait to get into UA, maybe I'll get number 1, and Steel's like, you're definitely gonna get number 1. From what I can see, they aren't very strong or even experienced, right? Hearing this, some of them would end up, staring at them, but they honestly wouldn't care, and they just end up walking and going into the building. Obviously, Izuku would have to leave Steel behind while taking the written exam because that is kind of cheating, but he is accompanied by Steel for when they are taking the practical and when they're sitting down. Talking about sitting down, he'd end up noticing Bakugo on his left. Sighing at his bad luck, he was about to switch seats before Bakugo would look at him and say, you damn Deku, haven't seen you in the last 10 months. I thought you dropped out of school. Actually, what are you doing here? Aren't you quirkless? Immediately, this is when Steel would end up shooting up and then saying, hey, don't talk to him like that, Pomeranian. I'm not sure who you think you are. I have more experience in my left joint than you do in your entire body. And this is when then started going back and forth, and Steel would just end up like sort of shocking Bakugo. And hearing this, Ida would get fed up and tell him to keep quiet and that they're in an institution, right? Both of them just end up yelling at Ida to shut up, sit down, and Ida would, like a good boy. And eventually they would start dying down their argument as President Might would walk in, and he would end up explaining the robots. Ida wouldn't interrupt this time because, he just got shut down once. Doesn't want it to happen again, sadly enough. And yeah, arriving at the battlefield with no tracksuit and just the same fit it had before, Izuku would be exuding a confident aura unlike anyone else there, right? As he starts scratching, he'd end up saying, my test is just not going turbo, right? To which Steel would agree and mention that, yeah, this is also just to train his control, right? Remember, you can do a lot of things with me, but you also can't rely solely on me. Izuku would grin and say, easy enough. And immediately the gates would end up opening, and Izuku, with Steel floating alongside him, and Ida would end up running out. And it would be neck and neck, actually. Ida would be surprised about how Izuku, who didn't look like he had a speed quirk, would be able to match him. Which Izuku would just end up smiling at him before increasing his speed even further and gapping him, leaving behind a sort of blue trail, right? It wouldn't be too obvious, but it would be sort of faint, right? Now, using only turbo energy and his tachyon physique, he would be decimating robots almost like he had 20% of all for one, right? Racking up a major amount of points. This is when we then move to the observation room, and the teacher would end up being surprised at this one kid who could effortlessly defeat robots. It would remind him of a younger, if not stronger, version of young All Might, right? To which Nezu would then proceed to explain that his quirk was turbo. It seems that he's able to radiate some sort of energy that is technically unlimited in a sense, actually, and it tends to overcharge electronics and also boost his physical stats. Not to mention, it also seems that he inherited his dad's physical capabilities in the first place. And his quirk gave birth to what looks to be a robot? They would all be confused about this part, but they wouldn't question it too much because, keep in mind, Tokiyomi does just have like a talking shadow, so it's not too bad. But what he'd find really intriguing is that he would mention that he was a late bloomer. Hearing this, Midnight would end up asking, how late are we talking here? And Nezu would say, he rigged his quirk 10 months ago. Aizawa would get a shit-eating grin as he would say, he has potential, I want him in my class. Now, all the teachers end up being surprised, but ultimately they would understand. In just 10 months, he was moving like a third year UA student? This isn't regular. He obviously had something special in him, right? Nezu would just end up smiling as he says, well, let's see how he deals with those robots. Well, let's see how he deals with this robot, and presses a red button, right? We'd move back to Izuku, who looks slightly fatigued, but his use of turbo energy is about to, cool down a little bit more, right? Turbo flow was taking a toll on him, and he was starting to overheat a little bit without Steel helping him, so he does slow down. And this one, Steel would end up warning him about a massive energy approaching. And the fact that somebody's trapped. Honestly, Izuku looked at it and it was just gonna leave it till he heard that someone else was stuck near the robot. And instantly a flip would switch, right? He would go from sort of goofy and confident to a more serious. He began running towards the robot before saying, "Time to act, Steel. Going turbo. Strength." Before eventually the other contestants would look at him and they would worry about what he's gonna do until they see Steel shoot into his chest and he's engulfed in that same blue spear of Tober energy. As energy fades, we'd see Izuku in his suit, but it would be much larger, rivaling All Might inside before jumping up and punching the zero pointer. As they collide, on contact, Izuku would fold the zero pointer like fresh laundry, sending it flying multiple yards back into a building and leading it to shut down. Still in strength, he lifted the rebel off the girl before saying, "Unlink," and splitting apart from Steel. Pretty exhausted right now, he's sort of heaving heavily before he end up, princess carrying the girl and hitting her with his signature smile, causing her to blush and sort of look away, right? But now without her mumbling, "Thank you." Now, as they get the recovery girl, she'd both give them gummies before end up saying that, "Oh, looks like someone found a little princess." Immediately, Izuku ended up saying, "Well, if a girl this beautiful would have me." And then, she'd end up blushing a little bit more, hiding her face deeper into Izuku's shirt, as Izuku would then say, "Well, I do have to get going," as he would end up putting her down and then saying that, "I hope we get to know each other better." But before he can even go, Ochako would actually end up giving her his number, and he ended up learning her name is obviously Ochako Uraraka. Immediately getting home, Steel would spend no time in snitching, right? Or sorry, he would waste no time in snitching. He ended up immediately telling Hisashi about how his son ended up finding this one nice girlfriend pretty much instantly, right? To which Hisashi would just end up replying that, he takes us from his old man, I guess, and ended up sort of laughing it through, right? And as I'm gonna say Steel would go back to rest, I'm just gonna say he's just hanging around somewhere in Izuku's room, Hisashi would look towards Izuku and end up saying that, "No matter what you got on that test, I know that you've made me proud, and I know that your mom would be proud too. You've made us proud, Izuku." Hearing this, Izuku would sort of tear up, the Midoriya tears, and end up hugging once again. 2 weeks would end up passing by, and the letter would finally arrive, right? He ended up opening it, and that's where he would see a sort of disc pop out. All of a sudden, he would hear, "Never fear, for I am here." Yes, it is true. I, All Might, I'm actually teaching this year in UA. But don't worry about that. Let's just talk about your score. On the written test, you did quite phenomenal, but even more so on the practical test, breaking the record, my record, and becoming the new record holder for UA, which is phenomenal. Welcome to Your Hero Academia. Hearing this, Izuku and Hisashi would immediately celebrate, and they would end up, eating out that day actually, with Steel included, even though Steel really can't eat food, and as them just talking and enjoying themselves, as Izuku would end up preparing for his his first day in UA High School. Sorry about the random cut, guys, had to get some water, but yeah, let's get straight back into it. We would have Izuku wake up the next day to a text from Uraraka saying that, when is he going to show up? Obviously, this is because they're going to end up starting to walk to class because they talked about this the night before or something like that. And, Izuku would obviously speed up, go and get Uraraka, and end up walking to class. As they would enter class, they end up seeing Baku and Ida fighting like in canon, to which him and Uraraka would end up ignoring, but Steel would stare straight daggers at Baku. Having read Izuku's memory and seeing all this bullying, Steel is just waiting for the chance to put Baku in his place, but he can wait a little bit longer. He is pretty much 60 years old or something crazy like that. But yeah, well, I mean, if we're including Hisashi's age, then 60. So I guess he is sort of like a grandpa. He does have patience, So anyways, they ended up sitting down and chatting a little bit more as more classmates ended up coming in, and this is when Aizawa would finally wake up, look around for 6 seconds and be like, "Dang, my class is kind of sorry," before saying, "Hey guys, I've been awake for 6 seconds and no one's noticed," which Steel and Izuku kind of did, but they just never brought it up because they know something there the entire time. But besides the point, this is when he ended up saying that, "Don't worry about nothing though, we're gonna go do our quirk evaluation." From here, we would have someone say, "What about orientation?" And they would end up saying, as I would end up saying, "Orientation, useless. You don't need none of that. Go change and meet me outside in the next 6 minutes, or else." Everyone not gonna, Aizawa's bad side would end up moving to change rooms, and in the change rooms we'd have the boys telling Izuku how he's sort of ripped, he looks like he works out, which he just says, "Well, I do kind of work out, but it's mostly just good genetics," right? Which couldn't be further from the truth. which couldn't be more on point with the truth, right? But anyways, as we finally get outside, we would have Aizawa call up Izuku for the ball throw before saying Izuku got number 1, is actually our new record holder. Let's see how he does here. To which Izuku would end up looking at Steel and saying, how much energy do you think I can output right now? Steel would end up saying, not too much, but like you still have to do it for like other stuff too, so pace yourself. Hearing this, Izuku would nod and end up just channeling a little bit of, turbo energy and throwing the ball, right? Aizawa would end up just nodding his head before showing them the score. 1,274 meters. The class would instantly get hyped, saying that they get to use their quirks like this and that they haven't done that before, and that's gonna be so much fun, right? Hearing the word fun would trigger something in Aizawa, right? He'd be like, nah, this ain't fun, boys, this ain't fun. Okay, let me stop like putting Aizawa in my own words. Anyways, he'd end up just looking at me like, fun, huh? The one who comes in last place has to leave. I'm talking about expelling them. Everyone would then, start despairing, saying that he can't do that before he just ends up ignoring them completely. Seeing this would have a great effect on them and he would, lock in, obviously, right? As we move through all the exams, all the tests, we would have Izuku excelling, getting first in pretty much everything, to be honest, except for the ball throw because, uraraka and, her technically cheat quirk for the ball throw. But, yeah, as this would happen, we'd actually have Aizawa calling Izuku up again, and he would look peeved. He'd end up looking at Izuku and saying, stop holding back, okay? Or else you're expelled. Everyone else here is trying their best, so why won't you? Izuku would then happily sort of smirk at him and say, well, I didn't want to discourage them too much, but if you tell me to. Immediately all his classmates are confused by this. Holding back? Except for people like Ida, who was actually at the orientation and they saw what he did. Izuku would then sort of stand up and say, some of you guys have been wondering why Steel's right here, right? About why I have this robot beside me. Well, he isn't more a robot as he is more so part of my quirk. As Izuku would then say, Steel, go turbo, strength, and immediately end up, popping turbo strength mode, right? At this, Izuku would wind back his arm and throw the ball, right? It would travel at the very least like 12,000 meters in like a split second before instantly like evaporating because air resistance and stuff like that, right? Aizawa would smile seeing this power as the shock waves would actually send some of them flying back, as he would say, now that's a heroic score, before turning the monitor towards the rest of his classmates and showing the error on it. Immediately Baku would end up losing his absolute cool, right? Flying at Izuku, and he would be yelling, you damn Deku, so when did you have a quirk? And he would actually get pretty close, but Izuku isn't worried. He has, turbo strength mode on, bro. Baku's not doing nothing. And he's as he's about to, absolutely tank the blow that Baku's sending his way, Aizawa would end up stopping him and saying, hey, don't do that again. Yeah, potential, but in my class, that's not enough, okay? Do that again, I'm gonna expel you, even if you do end up being like 5th. Hearing this, Baku would have to simmer down and, sit himself back down because he's acting a little bit crazy. But anyways, immediately we would finally have Izuku saying unlink, and they end up going inside. Aizawa would tell them that, they have pretty much free time until class ends, so self-introductions, I guess, as he just goes back to sleep. Everyone will go through their introductions before we have Izuku coming up to talk about his quote-unquote quirk, right? To which he would explain that his quirk name is Turbo. He radiates a sort of like immense energy that tends to, boost a lot of his physical stats and also, affects technology in a sort of way, right? And Steel is actually a byproduct of that. He's a necessity of his quirk because he's actually a late bloomer. The reason why he didn't unlock his quirk till later is because his quirk was too strong for his body. Even now that he can pretty much use his quirk, if he doesn't have Steel with him, he would probably have exploded and died. Hearing this, everyone would be sort of surprised on how drastic of a backfire this would be, but guessing that, he also does have a quirk this strong, it would sort of make sense in everyone's mind, right? And with that, they would just pass by in a blur. That's pretty much it for that day. Next day would come by and we'd just skip to Heroics 101 because nothing else is important, and we would hear footsteps before you end up hearing, never fear, for I am here, as All Might in his Golden Age costume, pretty sure, finally shows up. Golden Age Super Age. And then you end up saying that it's time for battle training. Come on, guys. As he ended up pushing a button and all the suitcases end up popping out, right? Now, they'd all go to go change besides Izuku, who just pretty much waits, right? I'm going to say that Uraraka comes out like second or third for the girls and immediately walks towards Izuku. Izuku, seeing Uraraka, would then say, I didn't know a girl as beautiful as you could become even prettier, right? Especially that outfit. It really compliments you. This is when she'd end up saying, okay, smooth guy. It's nice to hear that you still got your flirtatious streak. Anyways, how about your costume? Immediately, Izuku sort of just, chuckle before saying, you do realize I have steel, right? She would sort of understand, but not fully, before Izuku would then say, okay, go turbo. And, instantly just go into like turbo base mode. And he would just pretty much look like, strength mode, but, just not as bulky. Just pretty much a suit of armor around him, right? And this is when everyone else would realize that, oh yeah, he can just do that. He just has his own built-in armor pretty much, right? Which they would find kind of envious, but at the same time, understandable. So after this, All Might would then announce that it's hero versus villains, and that, the rule is that the heroes have to secure the villains and get the bomb, right? The teams would be the exact same as canon, and would just skip directly into Bakugo and, Izuku's fight, right? Prepping to go against Bakugo, Steel literally could not wait to beat him up. And because of this, they ended up making a plan that wasn't exactly the most efficient, but the one that would lead to the easiest interaction in fighting Bakugo. Pretty much, they both enter in from the bottom, and when Bakugo eventually appears on one of the upper floors, he would cover for Uraraka so she can get up as he fights Bakugo. After he's done making quick work of Bakugo, he would then end up going up and supporting her, right? Nodding, she would agree, and he would carry out the plan. End up walking in, and pretty much it's like second, third floor, end up backing up as Izuku would end up, feeling the heat that would come from Bakugo's explosion on the wall. As he would end up dodging, the exploding wall, and say Uraraka, get going, he probably doesn't even see you right now, right? She'd end up, completely running by, and now we would have Izuku/Steel against Bakugo, right? Now, for the first half, it would be just Izuku, right? He'd be mixing the heck out of Bakugo, right? He would look very experienced, like way beyond his ages, right? And he would still have, a little bit of mistakes here and there, but he seemed to be way more competent than he should have been. This is because actually, as you know, Steel can look through memories of his past hosts. So he ended up sharing a few memories from when, Max was actually a hero. And with this, we would have Izuku gaining combat experience so much easier. And eventually, he would end up pretty much manhandling Izuku with, like, advanced level skill, right? Bakugo, immediately getting pissed at this, would end up putting him in place and then saying, well, you think you're strong now? Well, dodge this, as he ended up pulling the blast on his gauntlet, right? Izuku would just say, turbo strength, and immediately, tank the attack, right? Feeling the heat coming off his attack, Steel knew that, if it wasn't for him, Izuku might have just died there, right? Instantly Steel's like, nah, give me control, because Steel can't take control, right? He takes, he did go back to turbo base mode, and they begin to pretty much manhandle him, right? If Izuku could fight with, like, advanced level skill, then Steel was, like, a master. His experience was no joke, especially on a war field, right? And to put it quite simply, Bakugo would get slumped, like he would get folded like fresh laundry, and as they're done, he would put captured around him and go up to help Uraraka, right? From here, it's just barbecue chicken. He ended up popping, turbo speed, blitzes Ida, as he can't even, Ida isn't even his speed when he's like in like base form. So like, I'm talking like base form, like not even with like the suit fully on. Like Ida does not stand you a chance here. So anyways, he ended up speed blitzing Ida, getting the bomb, and they both just high five, right? Before heading out and relaxing until the rest of the fights were done, right? After this, the only other interesting fight would be, Todoroki's, in which he just freezes everything, and Izuku ended up saying, he looks like he could be a pretty strong hero. Anyways, they end up walking home with Uraraka, and Ida ended up joining the group because I'm going to say they end up walking the same way. And after a while, he realized that, Ida isn't actually too bad, so, he pretty much accepts Ida pretty quickly, and they would end up having fun, right? Steel would, poke at Ida for being sort of a stickler, but obviously this was all an attempt to make, Ida less, uptight around them, right? Just to loosen them up a little bit, right? Eventually, they end up dropping off Ida, and then Izuku ended up dropping off Uraraka too, right? As he was about to leave, Uraraka would then say, hold on one second, before then moving towards Izuku and planting a kiss on his cheek, blushing before saying, see you tomorrow, and then walking back inside, right? Izuku on sort of all-time high would then, sort of high-five Steel on his way back home, and actually would end up popping turbo flight just to enjoy the scenery. And that's it, guys. Hope you guys have enjoyed. This has been What If Deku was Max Steel Part 1. Yeah, I think I did pretty good on this one. Hope you guys have enjoyed. Check out all my other videos, that being like, what if Deku was a heliotrope? What if Deku was Shisui? What if Naruto was Yoriichi? Those are like my 3 current ones right now I'm really trying to get through. And then also my new one, that being what if Deku was a Quincy, which is coming out right after this one, or like the next day or so. It should be scheduled by the time this is out. Anyways, let me stop rambling. Like and subscribe, guys, and without further ado, stay cold, stay frosted. Love you guys. Peace.